I hadn't even glanced at my phone that morning. The fever had hit me like a freight train sometime during the night, and by dawn I could barely lift my head from the pillow. My 5-year-old son Eli had been unusually quiet, which should have been my first warning sign. When I finally dragged myself out of the bathroom, clutching the door frame for support because my legs felt like they might give out at any moment, Eli came running toward me with my phone in his tiny hands and the brightest smile on his face. "Papa, I sent the Kings a message. They're going to make you better." My heart stopped. The Triplet Alpha Kings, Kaiser, Dimitri, and Theron, the 3 most powerful rulers in the entire realm. The men I'd been harboring feelings for over the past year, ever since I'd started working as a translator in the royal palace. Feelings I'd buried so deep I thought they'd never see daylight, because what chance did a common Omega have with 3 Alpha Kings? I snatched the phone from Eli's hands, my fingers trembling as I unlocked the screen. There it was, sent 23 minutes ago to all 3 of their private numbers. "Your Majesties, Papa is very sick. Can't wake up. Please come fast. Eli." Oh God, this couldn't be happening. I tried to steady my breathing, but the room was spinning violently. My body felt like it was on fire, every muscle aching with an intensity that made me want to cry. Every breath labored and painful. I stumbled toward my bed and collapsed onto it, feeling the mattress dip under my weight. Eli climbed up beside me immediately, his small fingers reaching out to touch my forehead with a gentleness that broke my heart into pieces. "Papa, you're going to be okay, right?" His voice was so small, so scared, and I hated that he had to see me like this. I forced a smile, even though it felt like my face might crack from the effort. "Of course, baby, Papa just needs to rest for a little while." But I knew this wasn't just a simple flu or cold. Something was seriously wrong with my body. My chest felt tight, my lungs burning with each breath like I was trying to breathe through water. I should have gone to the hospital yesterday when the symptoms first started, but between work deadlines and taking care of Eli alone, I'd convinced myself it would pass on its own. Now I was paying the price for that stubbornness. The sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment made me freeze completely. Multiple footsteps, moving fast, purposeful, urgent. Every nerve in my body screamed in absolute panic. It couldn't be them. It couldn't possibly be the Triplet Alpha Kings. They were busy men, the busiest in the entire realm, constantly in crucial council meetings, always dealing with complex matters of state and delicate diplomacy with neighboring kingdoms. There was absolutely no way they'd drop everything important and come here to my modest apartment in the lower district where common Omegas like me lived. But Eli was already scrambling off the bed with the energy only a healthy 5-year-old possessed, his little feet pattering across the floor as he ran toward the front door, with pure excitement radiating from every movement. "The Kings are here, Papa," he called back to me. "They came. They really came for you." I tried desperately to sit up. I tried to make myself even marginally presentable, but my body absolutely refused to cooperate in any way. My arms felt like lead weights attached to my shoulders. And the horrifying moment I pushed myself upright with what little strength I had remaining, a wave of dizziness hit me so violently and suddenly, I had to grip the sheets with white-knuckled desperation just to keep from falling right off the bed and onto the floor. My vision swam with black spots. My head pounded like someone was using it as a drum. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest at the simple act of sitting up. Through the haze of fever that was making everything feel dreamlike and unreal, I heard the front door open, heard Eli's excited chatter, his voice high and happy in that way children get when something wonderful is happening, and then I heard them. Footsteps. 3 distinct sets of confident, purposeful footsteps heading straight toward my bedroom with an urgency that made my fevered heart race even faster. I looked down at myself in horror. I was wearing old pajamas that had seen better days, probably 3 years ago. My hair was sticking up in every direction, matted with sweat from the fever. I probably smelled terrible from being too sick to properly bathe. My small bedroom was a mess, clothes strewn about because I'd been too exhausted to pick them up. The sheets were tangled from my restless, fevered sleep. This was not how I ever wanted the 3 Kings to see me. Not that I'd ever imagined they would see my bedroom at all, but if they had, it certainly wouldn't have been like this. I tried one more time to smooth down my hair, to look somewhat presentable, but my hands were shaking too badly to be effective, and then they were there. Kaiser, Dmitri, and Theron stood in my bedroom doorway, and for a moment I wondered if I was hallucinating from the fever. They were all in formal attire, clearly having come straight from some important meeting. Kaiser in his military dress uniform with gold braiding, Dmitri in a tailored black suit that probably cost more than my yearly salary, Theron in formal robes that marked him as the kingdom's chief diplomat. But there was something different in their expressions, something I'd never seen before in all our professional interactions at the palace. Their eyes were filled with concern, genuine worry that made my chest tighten for entirely different reasons than the illness. The way Kaiser said my name, soft, almost tender, I'd sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the fever. All three of them crossed the room at once, their movements synchronized in that eerie way Triplet sometimes had. Kaiser's hand immediately reached for my forehead, and I found myself leaning into the touch despite my better judgment, despite knowing I shouldn't be this familiar with royalty. "You're burning up," he said, his voice dropping lower with concern. "Why didn't you call us sooner? Why didn't you tell us you were this ill?" I couldn't find words to respond. My brain was too foggy, my thoughts too scattered and disjointed. All I could focus on was the fact that 3 Alpha Kings, the rulers of the entire realm, were standing in my bedroom, touching my face like I was something precious and fragile. "It's just a bug," I managed to croak out, my voice barely recognizable. "I'll be fine in a day or two." "You're clearly not fine," Dmitri said, and his tone was firm, leaving absolutely no room for arguments. "You need to see a physician immediately. We're taking you to the Royal Medical Wing right now." I started to shake my head in protest, but the movement made the room spin so violently I thought I might be sick. Eli appeared at Theron's side, tugging on his royal robes with the fearlessness only a child could have around powerful rulers. "Your Majesty, Papa's really stubborn about doctors. He always says he doesn't have time to be sick." All 3 kings' expressions darkened simultaneously at that statement. Theron knelt down to Eli's level, his voice gentle. "You did exactly the right thing texting us, little one. Your papa needs help, and you were brave enough to ask for it. That's what we're here for." Eli beamed up at him with pure adoration. "Are you going to make Papa better?" "We're going to make sure he gets the best care possible," Theron promised, then looked at his brothers. "We need to move him now." Before I could protest again, Kaiser simply scooped me up from the bed like I weighed nothing at all. His arms were strong and warm, and I was too weak to do anything except let my head fall against his chest. The scent of him surrounded me, that distinctive alpha scent of winter pine and authority, and my omega instincts responded despite my illness, recognizing mate even though that was impossible. Dmitri grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around me while Theron picked up Eli. "We're taking both of you to the palace," Dmitri said. "Your son will be cared for while the physicians examine you. No arguments." I wanted to argue anyway. Wanted to tell them this was inappropriate, that common omegas didn't get carried to the royal palace by kings themselves, but I was too sick and too scared to fight them. The journey to the palace was a blur. I remember being placed in what must have been the royal carriage, remember Eli's small hand holding mine, remember the 3 kings talking in low urgent voices about physicians and treatments. When we arrived, I was immediately taken to the Royal Medical Wing, a place I'd never been despite working in the palace for a year. The physicians descended on me like a swarm, taking my temperature, listening to my lungs, asking questions I could barely answer. Through it all, the 3 kings stayed. They didn't leave even when the head physician tried to shoo them out for the examination. "We're staying," Kaiser said flatly. "Examine him with us present or not at all." The diagnosis came quickly: severe pneumonia in both lungs, dangerously high fever, dehydration. The head physician, an elderly Omega woman with kind eyes, looked genuinely concerned. "Your Majesty," she addressed me for the first time as if I were royalty myself, which was absurd. "You're very ill. This should have been caught days ago. Why didn't you seek treatment sooner?" "I didn't have time," I whispered. "I had translation work to finish, deadlines to meet, a son to care for. I couldn't afford to be sick." The 3 kings exchanged looks I couldn't interpret. Then Dmitri spoke, his voice tight with something that might have been anger, but felt like concern. "You're staying here in the Royal Medical Wing until you're fully recovered. We're assigning you a private room and round-the-clock care." "Your Majesty," I started, but Theron cut me off. "Don't." His voice was gentle but firm. "Don't call us that right now. Just let us take care of you. Please." The please broke me. I nodded weakly, too exhausted to fight. The physician started treatment immediately, hooking me up to an IV for fluids and antibiotics. The medication made me drowsy, and I felt myself starting to drift. The last thing I remember before sleep claimed me was the sensation of 3 different hands holding mine, 3 distinct alpha scents surrounding me like a protective barrier, and Eli's voice asking if Papa would be okay now. "Yes," one of the kings answered, though I was too far gone to tell which one. "Your Papa's going to be just fine, we promise. Welcome to our channel. I hope you all are doing great. If you're new here, say please hit the subscribe button for more stories like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story about emergency texts, unexpected feelings, and discovering that sometimes the people you think are unreachable are actually closer than you ever imagined. I woke to voices. Soft, worried masculine voices having a conversation they clearly thought I couldn't hear through my fevered unconsciousness. The medication must have been wearing off because sounds were becoming clearer, more distinct, filtering through the haze that had surrounded me. "He's been working himself to absolute exhaustion for months," Dmitri was saying, and his voice carried a weight of guilt I'd never heard from him before. "Did any of you actually see his apartment when we were there? Look at the state of it, barely anything in the cabinets. Half-empty containers and expired food. He's been skipping his own meals to make sure his son had enough to eat, prioritizing that child over his own health and well-being. The translator's salary is sufficient for a comfortable life," Kaiser argued, but even as he said it, his tone suggested he was already planning to do something dramatic about the situation. "We pay our palace staff fairly. Why hasn't he asked for assistance if he was struggling? Requested in advance or additional support?" "Because he's too proud," Theron said quietly, and I could hear him moving closer to my bed, his footsteps soft on the medical wing's floors. "And because he probably thinks we don't notice him, that he's just another palace employee among hundreds, someone forgettable and replaceable. We've been absolute fools, haven't we?" Dimitri's voice was bitter with self-recrimination. "Complete and utter fools. A year, an entire year of watching him, wanting him desperately, and we never once told him. Never once made it clear that he matters to us, that he's important, that we see him as more than just a skilled translator. And now he's lying here dangerously sick because he was too afraid to ask for help from anyone, let alone us. We should have noticed sooner," Kaiser said, and I could hear the self-anger in his normally controlled voice. "Should have paid closer attention, made our intentions clear months ago instead of dancing around our feelings like uncertain youths." I kept my eyes closed deliberately, my heart pounding so hard I was worried they might hear it and realize I was awake and listening to every word. They'd been watching me, wanting me. For an entire year. What did that even mean? How had I completely missed the attention of 3 alpha kings? My fever had broken completely sometime during the night, leaving me weak as a newborn but clear-headed for the first time in what felt like forever. The fog that had wrapped around my brain like thick cotton was finally lifting enough for me to process what I was hearing, to understand the implications. "We tell him everything," Kaiser said firmly, his voice taking on that commanding tone he used in council meetings. "As soon as he's well enough to hear it properly without the fever clouding his judgment, we tell him absolutely everything, that we've been in love with him since the very first time he walked into the council room, 6 months into his employment, with his translation notes clutched nervously in his hands. That we've been finding ridiculous excuses to request his services specifically, creating reasons to need his particular linguistic skills just to be near him, that we're completely done pretending this is just professional interest or appreciation for his work." "Agreed," Dmitri and Theron said in perfect unison, that eerie twin synchronization that sometimes happened with the 3 of them. "No more hiding," Dmitri continued. "No more pretending we don't feel the bond. We lay it all out honestly and let him decide what he wants to do with that information. I couldn't pretend to be asleep anymore, not with my heart racing and my mind spinning with everything I'd just heard. My eyes fluttered open slowly, adjusting to the soft light filtering through the medical wing's expensive curtains. All 3 kings immediately moved to my bedside, as if pulled by the same invisible string, their faces flooding with relief the moment they saw I was conscious and aware. "You're awake?" Theron said, relief flooding his features. "How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by a warhorse," I admitted, my voice hoarse, but better than yesterday. Here, Dmitri reached for a cup of water with a straw, holding it gently to my lips. Drink slowly. The water was cool and soothing against my throat. When I'd had enough, I looked at each of them in turn. You stayed. All night, Kaiser confirmed. We weren't leaving you alone. Where's Eli? I asked, sudden panic making me try to sit up. He's fine, Theron assured me, gently pressing me back against the pillows. He's in the royal nursery being spoiled rotten by the palace staff. They're probably feeding him his weight in pastries as we speak. I relaxed slightly. How long have I been here? 2 days, Dmitri said. Your fever broke last night finally. The physicians say you're responding well to treatment, but you need complete rest for at least 2 weeks. I can't take 2 weeks off work, I protested. The council meetings require translation services. We'll manage, Kaiser said firmly. Your health is more important than any meeting. Your health is more important than anything. The intensity in his voice made my breath catch. Why, the question escaped before I could stop it. Why do you care so much? I'm just a translator. You're not just anything, Theron said, his dark gold eyes holding mine. You haven't been just a translator to us for a very long time. We heard what you said, I whispered. Before, when you thought I was asleep, about watching me, wanting me. The three of them exchanged glances, then Kaiser spoke. Good, that saves us from having to figure out how to bring it up. Yes, we've been watching you. Yes, we want you. Yes, we're in love with you. All three of us. It's been driving us mad for months. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Fever dreams. I was still sick and hallucinating. You're kings, I said weakly. I'm nobody. Omega from the lower district with a child and barely enough money to make rent. You could have anyone. We don't want anyone, Dmitri said, taking my hand in his. We want you. Stubborn, proud, brilliant you. We want your son who texts us for help when you're too stubborn to ask for it yourself. We want the family you've built, the life you've created, all of it. This is insane. I breathed. People will talk. Scandal. There are protocols. Let them talk, Kaiser said. We're the kings. We make the protocols. I looked at each of them, searching for any sign of deception or doubt. All I saw was sincerity, raw, honest emotions that made my chest ache. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything yet, Theron suggested gently. Just focus on getting better. Let us take care of you for once. And when you're well, when you're thinking clearly, we'll have this conversation properly. For now, just rest. Just let yourself be cared for. I wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the logical reasons this was impossible, but exhaustion was pulling at me again, the medication making me drowsy. As I drifted off, I felt 3 distinct hands holding mine. Heard 3 voices murmuring promises I was too tired to fully process. Sleep now, one of them said. We'll be here when you wake up. We're not going anywhere. The next few days passed in a strange blur of medication schedules, physician visits, and the constant, unwavering presence of 3 alpha kings who seemed absolutely determined to personally oversee every single aspect of my care. On the 2nd day, when I was finally strong enough to sit up properly without the world spinning violently, Kaiser brought me books from the Royal Library. Not just any books, but carefully selected titles he thought I'd enjoy, based on a year of quietly observing what I read during breaks. There's a new translation of the northern poems you were trying to find last month, he said, setting a stack of 5 books on the table beside my bed, and I noticed you never finished that history of the Western Kingdoms. I found an annotated edition with the missing chapters. You remembered that? I asked, amazed. I remember everything about you, he said simply, and the honesty in his voice made my breath catch. Dmitri took charge of my meals with an intensity that would have been amusing if it wasn't so touching. He consulted with the royal kitchens about foods that would be gentle on a recovering system, but still provide proper nutrition. He made sure I ate every single meal, sitting with me and sometimes feeding me himself when I was too weak or shaky to hold a spoon properly. On the 3rd day, when I tried to insist I could feed myself, he simply raised an eyebrow and said, "Humor me. Let me take care of you." So I let him carefully spoon soup into my mouth, let him wipe the corners with a cloth napkin, let him make sure I drank enough water and tea. There was something profoundly intimate about it, about letting someone care for you so completely. Each spoonful felt like a confession of devotion. Neither of us was quite ready to speak aloud. Theron spent hours entertaining Eli while I rested, and I could hear them through my partially open door. The sound of my son's laughter, genuine and frequent and joyful, was better medicine than anything the physicians could prescribe. Theron taught him strategy games, read him stories with different voices for each character, took him to the palace gardens to see the exotic flowers and friendly peacocks that roamed the grounds. On the fourth day, Eli came into my room, bursting with excitement. "Papa, Papa, guess what? Papa Theron said I can have a puppy when you're all better. A real puppy from the royal kennels. Is that okay?" I looked at Theron, who stood in the doorway looking slightly sheepish. "I may have gotten carried away," he admitted, but the look on his face when we visited the kennels, I couldn't help myself. "A puppy is fine," I said, my heart so full it ached. "Thank you for making him happy." "He deserves to be happy," Theron said. "You both do." Each night, all three of them stayed. They'd set up a rotation at first, one keeping watch while the others rested in nearby rooms. But by the third night, I woke to find all three of them in my room. Kaiser in the chair by my bed, Dimitri on the small couch by the window, Theron on a pile of cushions on the floor. They'd all fallen asleep in uncomfortable positions rather than leave me alone. "You don't have to do this," I whispered when Kaiser stirred and noticed I was awake. "We want to," he said quietly. "Go back to sleep. We're right here," and somehow, knowing they were there, I slept better than I had in years. The nightmares that usually plagued me, fears of being alone, of not being enough, of failing Eli, they didn't come. Instead, I dreamed of safety, of belonging, of home. By the fifth day, I was strong enough to sit in a chair by the window, to walk slowly to the bathroom without assistance, to feel almost human again. The physician declared I was recovering remarkably well, though I still needed another week of rest before returning to any kind of work. That evening, when Eli was playing with some new toys Dimitri had somehow acquired, the three kings sat with me and we talked, really talked, for the first time without the urgency of illness hanging over us. "Tell us about yourself," Theron said. "We've been watching you for a year, but we want to know the things we couldn't observe. Your history, your dreams, what makes you happy." So I told them about growing up poor in a small village, about discovering my gift for languages, about the scholarship that brought me to the capital city, about meeting Eli's father at 19, about the brief, sweet relationship we had before Omega sickness took him, about raising Eli alone, about the fear and pride and overwhelming love that came with single parenthood, about getting the job at the palace and thinking I'd finally made it, finally achieved stability and security for my son. "And what about your dreams?" Kaiser asked. "What do you want for your future?" I'd never really let myself dream big. My focus had always been survival, making it through each day, keeping Eli fed and clothed and happy. But sitting there with three alpha kings looking at me like my dreams mattered, I let myself imagine. "I want Eli to grow up safe and loved," I said. "I want him to have opportunities I never had. I want to keep working with languages, maybe eventually teach others. I hesitated, then pushed forward. I want to not be alone anymore. I want partnership and support and someone to share the burdens with." "You have that now," Dimitri said. "If you want it, we're offering all of that and more." The intensity in his eyes made my heart race. "But I need to understand why," I said desperately. "Why me? You're kings. You could have any Omega in the realm. Any noble family would offer their children for a chance at a royal bonding. So why choose a common translator with a child and barely enough money saved to cover a month's expenses? Because," Theron said, "when we see you with Eli, the way you love him so fiercely and completely, it makes us want to be part of that. Because when you translate in council meetings, you don't just convert words from one language to another, you capture the nuance and emotion and intent. Because you're brilliant and kind and strong in ways that have nothing to do with physical power. Because when you smile, really smile, it lights up the entire room. And because," Kaiser added, "the moment we saw you, all three of us felt it. The pull, the recognition, the certainty that you were meant to be ours and we were meant to be yours." "Fated mates," Dimitri finished. "It's rare for triplet alphas to all feel the bond with the same Omega, but when it happens, it's absolute, undeniable. We've been fighting it for a year because we didn't want to overwhelm you or use our positions to pressure you. But then Eli sent that text, I whispered, and you stopped fighting. And we realized we'd been idiots, Theron said. Wasting time we could have spent showing you how much you mean to us. Time we could have spent easing your burdens and making your life easier. We can't get that year back, but we can make sure every day going forward you know you're cherished. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks again. I seemed to cry a lot around these three alphas, but they were good tears, healing tears, the kind that came from feeling truly seen and valued for the first time in longer than I could remember. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. All three responded. What happens if this doesn't work out? If the bond isn't as strong as you think, or if court politics make it impossible, or if I'm not what you need after all, what happens to Eli and me then? We make it work, Kaiser said firmly. There is no scenario where we give up on this, on you. If court politics are a problem, we deal with them. We're the kings. We make the rules. And as for the bond not being strong enough, he reached out and took my hand. That's not possible. I can feel you already, your emotions, your pain, your hope. It's all there, thrumming through the bond that's already forming even before the official claiming. We all feel it, Dmitri confirmed, and it's only going to get stronger. You're stuck with us now. I found myself laughing through my tears, stuck with three Alpha Kings. Worse fates have befallen common Omegas, I suppose. Much worse. Theron agreed with a smile. On the 7th day, the physician declared I was well enough to leave the medical wing, though I still needed to rest and avoid strenuous activity for another week. The three kings had a proposition for me. Come stay in our personal quarters, Kaiser said, you and Eli both. Not as mates yet, not until you're ready for that step, but as our guests. Let us continue caring for you. Let Eli get used to the palace and to us. Let yourself heal completely without worrying about rent or food or any practical concerns. I wanted to refuse. My pride demanded I go back to my apartment, prove I could take care of myself and my son without help. But then I thought about that apartment, the broken heating, the thin walls, the long walk to Eli's school. I thought about the relief of not having to worry about money for a while, about giving Eli experiences I could never provide on my own. And I thought about these three alphas who genuinely seemed to want us in their lives. Okay, I said, we'll stay for a while, just until I'm fully recovered and we figure out what this is between us. The relief on their faces was almost comical. Thank you, Theron said, for giving us this chance, for trusting us with something so precious. I stared at them. You're serious? You actually want me to move into the palace? Not just the palace, Dmitri clarified, our personal quarters. We want to court you properly. We want Eli to grow up safe and provided for. We want to wake up every morning knowing you're near. We want everything. This is happening too fast, I said, my head spinning. You barely know me. We've been observing you for a year, Kaiser pointed out. We know you take your tea with honey and no milk. We know you sing to Eli when you think no one's listening. We know you work yourself to exhaustion because you're afraid of being seen as weak or incapable. We know you read poetry in 3 different languages. We know exactly who you are, and we want all of it. But why? I asked desperately. Why me when you could have any Omega in the realm? Any noble, any wealthy family's child? Because when your son sent us that text, Theron said, his voice rough with emotion, when we read that you were sick, all 3 of us felt the same thing. Terror. Absolute terror at the thought of losing you before we'd ever really had you. We left a crucial council meeting without a word. We ran to our horses. We rode like demons were chasing us. Because nothing mattered except getting to you. That's not normal. Dmitri continued, that's not how you react to just an employee. That's how you react when your mate is in danger, your fated mate. Are you saying I couldn't finish the sentence? We're saying we felt the bond the moment we saw you, Kaiser said, all 3 of us simultaneously. We've been fighting it for months because we didn't want to overwhelm you. Didn't want to use our positions to pressure you. But then Eli sent that text and we realized we'd been wasting time. Time we could have spent showing you how much you mean to us. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. I don't know how to do this, how to be with 3 alphas, how to be an Omega to kings. You don't have to know, Theron said, wiping my tears gently. We'll figure it out together, one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just the possibility of building something real. Will you at least consider it? Dmitri asked. Consider moving into the palace. Consider letting us court you properly. Consider giving us a chance to prove we're serious about this." I looked at each of them in turn, Kaiser with his military bearing and soft eyes, Dmitri with his sharp intellect and gentle hands, Theron with his diplomatic grace and tender heart, three alpha kings who somehow wanted me. "Okay," I whispered, "I'll consider it. I'll give you a chance." The relief on their faces was almost comical. "But I have conditions," I added quickly. They leaned forward, attentive. "I need to keep working. I won't be a kept omega sitting around doing nothing. My son comes first always. If at any point Eli is uncomfortable or unhappy, we reassess everything. And if this doesn't work out, if the reality doesn't match the fantasy, you let me leave with dignity, no using your power to keep me trapped." "Agreed," all three said immediately. "To all of it, anything you need." I took a shaky breath. "Then yes. When I'm well enough, Eli and I will move into your quarters. We'll try this. You won't regret it," Kaiser promised. "We'll spend every day proving that we're worthy of your trust." 2 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of the royal quarters feeling completely overwhelmed. The space was enormous, easily 20 times the size of my old apartment. There were separate bedrooms, a massive common area, a private library, even a playroom that Eli had already claimed as his own. "This is too much," I said weakly. "It's what you deserve," Dmitri corrected, carrying the last of our meager belongings inside. "You and Eli both deserve space and comfort and security." The Triplet kings had been true to their word. They'd courted me properly over the past 2 weeks as I recovered, bringing flowers, writing letters, spending hours talking with me and playing with Eli. They'd met with the palace council and formally announced their intention to court me, dealing swiftly with any nobles who dared object. And now here I was, moving into the royal quarters like something out of a fairy tale. Except fairy tales didn't prepare you for the reality of living with 3 powerful alphas who wanted to provide for your every need. "Papa," Eli called from his new bedroom. "There's a toy chest in here bigger than our old apartment." I laughed despite my nerves. "That might be a slight exaggeration, baby." Theron appeared beside me. "Nervous?" he asked quietly. "Terrified," I admitted. "What if I don't fit here? What if I'm not enough for all 3 of you?" His hand found mine, warm and reassuring. "You already fit. You've always fit. We're the ones who had to prove we were worthy of you, not the other way around." That evening, we had dinner together for the first time in the royal quarters. The staff had prepared an elaborate meal, but at my request, we ate in the smaller, informal dining room instead of the massive, formal one. It felt more like family this way. Eli chattered excitedly about his new room, about the palace gardens he wanted to explore, about everything. The 3 kings listened attentively, asking questions, making suggestions, treating my son like he was already their own. After dinner, after Eli was bathed and tucked into his new bed, I found myself alone with the 3 kings in the common area. We should establish some boundaries," I said nervously. "Make sure everyone's comfortable with the arrangement." "What did you have in mind?" Kaiser asked, his posture relaxed but his eyes attentive. I took a breath. "Your individual sleeping arrangements. I know traditional bonding involves physical intimacy, but I'm not ready for that yet. Not until I'm sure this is real and lasting. I need time." "We have all the time in the world," Dmitri assured me. "We're not going to rush you into anything. You set the pace entirely." I nodded, relieved. "And Eli. I need to make sure he understands what's happening, that you're not replacing his father but adding to our family." "His father?" Theron asked gently. It was clear this was a topic I needed to address. "He died when Eli was 2, I said quietly. "Omega sickness after a difficult birth. We were never bonded, just together briefly. He was kind, but we never had time to build something lasting." "I'm sorry," all 3 kings said with genuine sympathy. "It must have been difficult raising Eli alone." "It was," I admitted, "but it also made me strong, made me value what I have, made me careful about who I let into our lives. And I understand why," Kaiser said. "Why you're cautious with us, why you need time and proof. We'll give you both, however long it takes." The next few months were a strange adjustment period. I continued working as a translator, though now I lived in the palace and my commute was significantly shorter. The kings made sure Eli had the best tutors, the finest clothes, everything he could possibly need. But more than material things, they gave him attention and love. Kaiser taught Eli sword forms using wooden practice swords. Dmitri read him stories every night. Theron took him to the gardens and taught him about plants and diplomacy. And slowly, without me quite noticing when it happened, Eli started calling them Papa Kaiser, Papa Dmitri, and Papa Theron. The first time I heard it, I cried, not from sadness, but from joy. My son had 3 fathers who loved him, who showed up for him, who would protect and guide him, and I was falling in love with all 3 of them more deeply every day. 4 months after moving into the royal quarters, things shifted. I'd been working late in the palace library, finishing a particularly complex translation. When I returned to our quarters, I found Eli already asleep and the 3 kings waiting up for me. "You work too hard," Dmitri observed as I set down my materials. "Says the king who regularly works past midnight," I countered with a smile. "Fair point," he conceded, "but you look exhausted. Come sit." I settled onto the couch between Kaiser and Theron, with Dmitri taking the chair across from us. "We wanted to talk to you about something," Theron said. My heart rate picked up. "That sounds serious." "It is," Kaiser said, "but hopefully in a good way." "We've been courting you for 4 months now," Dmitri began. "We've given you time and space to adjust, to be sure of your feelings. And we think we've shown you through our actions how serious we are about building a life together." "You have," I agreed softly. "You've been wonderful, all 3 of you, beyond anything I imagined. Then we need to know," Theron said gently. "Are you ready?" "Ready for what?" I asked, though I thought I knew. "Ready to accept our bond," Kaiser said. "Ready to let us claim you properly as our mate. Ready to make this permanent." I looked at each of them, these 3 alphas who had somehow become my entire world, who had taken in my son and loved him as their own, who had respected my boundaries while making their devotion clear, who had changed my entire life. "I'm ready," I whispered. "I've been ready for weeks. I was just afraid to say it, afraid you'd realize you'd made a mistake." "Never," Dmitri said fervently. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to us, all 3 of us." "So yes," Kaiser asked, "you'll accept our bond. You'll be our Omega officially." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Yes," to all of it. "Yes." The bonding ceremony was held 1 week later in the palace's private chapel. It was small, intimate, all just us and Eli and a few witnesses required by law. I wore traditional Omega bonding robes in deep blue. The 3 kings wore formal attire that marked them as the realm's rulers. Eli stood beside me holding a ceremonial ribbon that would bind us all together. The priest spoke the ancient words, but I barely heard them. All I could focus on was the 3 alphas standing before me, looking at me like I was their entire world. "Do you, Kaiser, Dmitri, and Theron, accept this Omega as your bonded mate?" The priest asked. "We do," they said in unison. "Do you accept these alphas as your bonded mates?" The priest asked me. "I do," I said clearly. "Then by the power vested in me and the laws of this realm, I declare you bonded. May your union be blessed with joy and prosperity." The 3 kings moved forward together. And Kaiser's mark was placed on the left side of my neck, Dmitri's mark on the right, Theron's mark on my collarbone. 3 bites, 3 bonds, 3 connections that flared to life simultaneously. I gasped as the bond snapped into place. Suddenly I could feel them, their emotions, their devotion, their absolute love for me and for Eli. It was overwhelming and perfect in everything I never knew I needed. When the ceremony ended, when we returned to our quarters as a bonded family, Eli immediately asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. "Does this mean you're my papas forever now?" "Forever," Kaiser confirmed, kneeling down to Eli's level. "Nothing can change that. We're a family now, officially." Eli threw his arms around Kaiser's neck. "Good. I love you. Papa Kaiser." "I love you too, Eli," Kaiser said, his voice thick with emotion. "All 3 of us love you more than anything." That night, after Eli was tucked in and sleeping soundly, the 3 kings and I finally consummated our bond. It was gentle and passionate and perfect. 3 alphas worshipping their Omega, showing me through touch and whispered words exactly how much I meant to them. Afterward, lying tangled together in their massive bed, I felt complete for the first time in my life. "I love you," I told them, "all 3 of you." "We love you too," they responded, more than words can express. A year later, I stood in the palace gardens watching Eli play with his younger sibling, a daughter we'd named Luna, who had been born 6 months ago. 3 alphas, 1 omega, 2 children. It shouldn't have worked. The logistics were complicated, the politics were messy, and there were still nobles who whispered about the unconventional arrangement, but it did work, perfectly. The 3 kings ruled their realm with wisdom and strength. I continued my work as translator, now also serving as an advisor on omega rights and welfare. Eli was thriving, confident and loved and secure, and Luna was spoiled rotten by her 3 fathers and older brother. "Papa," Eli called out, running over. "Luna wants to see the fish pond. Can we go?" "Of course," Theron said, scooping up his daughter. "Who else wants to come?" "All of us," Kaiser and Dmitri said together, and I laughed. We always went everywhere together. That was the beauty of it. We walked through the gardens as a family, the 3 kings taking turns carrying Luna, while Eli ran ahead pointing out flowers and insects. Other palace residents smiled at us as we passed. What had once been scandalous had become accepted, normalized, even admired. When we reached the fish pond, I sat on a bench watching my family. Kaiser was showing Eli how to properly feed the fish. Dmitri was making Luna laugh with silly faces. Theron stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "Happy?" he asked quietly. "So happy I don't have words for it," I admitted. "This, all of this, it's more than I ever dreamed possible." "It started with a text message," he said with a smile. "A worried little boy asking for help." "Best text message we ever received," I agreed. "Changed everything." The 3 kings came to sit beside me on the bench, each of them reaching for me in their own way. Kaiser's hand on my knee, Dimitri's arm around my shoulders, Theron's fingers laced with mine. "We're the lucky ones," Kaiser said. "But we could have gone our whole lives not knowing what we were missing, not knowing that an Omega translator and his son were exactly what we needed." I leaned into their combined warmth, watching Eli try to teach his baby sister about fish, even though she was far too young to understand. This was family. This was love. This was home. And it had all started because my son had been brave enough to ask for help when I was too stubborn to do it myself. "Thank you, Eli," I whispered, "for being braver than your papa, for knowing when to reach out, for bringing us all together." Eli looked over and grinned. "That's okay, Papa. That's what family does. They help each other." And he was absolutely right. 6 months after Luna's birth, life had found a beautiful rhythm. Every morning started the same way. I would wake to find at least one king already up with the baby, usually Dmitri, who seemed to have a sixth sense for when Luna needed feeding. Kaiser would be in the training yard, preparing for his day, and Theron would be in the kitchen making breakfast, an oddly domestic task for a king, but one he'd claimed as his own. Eli would stumble out of his room sleepy-eyed and looking for cuddles, and we'd all gather around the table as a family before the day's responsibilities began. One particular morning, about 8 months after our bonding ceremony, I woke feeling off in a way that was becoming familiar. The exhaustion, the nausea, the heightened sensitivity to smells. No, I thought, it can't be. But my omega instincts were rarely wrong. The royal physician confirmed it 3 days later. I'm pregnant again, 10 weeks along. The news hit me like a thunderbolt. Luna was only 8 months old, Eli was 6. I'd assumed we were done having children, that our family was complete. How do you tell your mates that you're pregnant when you barely have time to breathe with the children you already have? But the 3 kings' reactions were immediate and overwhelming when I finally gathered the courage to tell them that evening. Dmitri had actually gone pale before breaking into the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Kaiser had picked me up and spun me in a careful circle despite my protests, and Theron had simply held me, his hands shaking, whispering thank you against my hair. "Another baby," Kaiser had said, wonder in his voice. "We're having another child. You're happy?" I'd asked uncertainly. "We're unprepared. Luna is still so small." Eli is just adjusting to having a little sister. It's chaos. Beautiful chaos, Dmitri had corrected, the best kind. And we'll figure it out together like we always do. The pregnancy was harder than Luna's had been. Chasing after 2 children while growing a third took its toll. I was exhausted constantly, emotional in ways that made me cry over small things. The three kings adapted, taking on more childcare duties, ensuring I rested, managing the household while I focused on staying healthy. At my 4-month checkup, the physician had news that made my head spin even more. "It appears to be twins," she'd said, her expression caught between congratulations and concern. I didn't tell the kings immediately. I needed time to process, to figure out how I felt about carrying 2 more children. We were going to have 4 children. 4. Most families had 1 or 2, some had 3, but 4. That evening, watching Eli help feed Luna while the 3 kings took turns reading stories, I realized it didn't matter. More children meant more love, more chaos, more joy. When I told them about the twins, their reactions were predictably over the top. "We're having twins," Theron had repeated, like he needed to hear it again to believe it. 2 babies at once. "Actually," I'd admitted, laughing at their stunned expressions. "We're going to have 4 children total. Eli, Luna, and 2 more. A very full house, the biggest family." "Good," Kaiser had said firmly. "We have a lot of love to give." The twins arrived 6 months later after a labor that lasted 18 hours and required all 3 kings to take shifts holding my hand because I refused to let any of them leave. 2 boys. So identical like their fathers in some ways, but each with their own personality from the start. We named them River and Atlas. River because he moved like water even in the womb, always flowing and changing. Atlas because he seemed determined to carry the world on his tiny shoulders from day one. Eli was 7 when the twins were born, old enough to be a genuine help with his younger siblings. He took his big brother role seriously, protective of Luna and gentle with the babies in ways that made my heart swell. Luna at 2 was fascinated by the twins, always wanting to touch their tiny hands and feet, singing them songs in her own made-up language. The first year with 4 children was exhausting in ways I'd never experienced. There were nights when I fell into bed so tired I couldn't remember my own name. Days when the crying seemed endless and I wondered if we'd made a terrible mistake. But there were also moments of pure magic, all 4 children playing together, their laughter filling the palace. Eli teaching Luna her letters while I nursed the twins. The 3 kings taking turns walking fussy babies at 3 in the morning, all of them somehow managing to look noble even with spit up on their royal robes. When the twins were 6 months old, Kaiser brought up something we'd been discussing privately. "The council wants to formalize your position," he'd said one evening after all the children were finally asleep. "They want to make you queen consort officially, with full authority and voting rights and governance." I'd stared at him. "I'm a translator who got lucky. I'm not qualified to be a queen." "You've implemented more positive changes in 2 years than most rulers manage in a lifetime," Dmitri had argued. "You've reformed Omega welfare laws, established education programs, created support systems for struggling families. You're already acting as a queen. The title would just make it official." I'd looked at Theron, who'd been quiet. "What do you think?" "I trust you," he'd said simply. "I trust your judgment, your compassion, your intelligence. If the council recognizes what we've known all along, that you're meant to lead beside us, then that's only right." So I'd accepted. The ceremony was small, intimate, just family and close advisors. But when they placed the consort's crown on my head, when the realm officially recognized me as their queen, I'd felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. These were my people now. Their welfare, their happiness, their future. It was a responsibility I took seriously. 2 years passed. Eli turned 9, already showing signs of the leader he'd become. Luna was 4, speaking 3 languages fluently and working on a 4th. The twins were 2, identical terrors who kept everyone on their toes with their synchronized mischief. The realm was thriving, our family was thriving, everything felt perfect. Then came the day that reminded me nothing stays perfect forever. It started with Eli coming home from his tutoring sessions looking troubled. He waited until the younger children were occupied before approaching me in my office. "Papa, can I ask you something?" He'd grown so much, my first baby, nearly to my shoulder now. "Of course, Eli, always." "Do you remember my other father?" He'd asked quietly. "The one who died when I was little." My heart had clenched. I'd known this conversation would come eventually. "Yes, I remember him. His name was Marcus. He was kind and gentle and he loved you very much. Do you ever wish?" He'd hesitated. "Do you ever wish I was really Papa Kaiser's and Papa Dimitri's and Papa Theron's? Like Luna and River and Atlas, like I was born from all of you instead of just you and Marcus. Oh, Eli, I'd pulled him into my arms. You are theirs. Maybe not by blood, but in every way that matters. They chose you. They chose to love you and raise you and be your fathers. That's more powerful than any biological connection. But what if I'm not really a prince? He'd whispered. What if because I'm not really their son, I don't belong here? That evening, I told the three kings about Eli's concerns. They'd been devastated. The next morning, they'd called Eli into the throne room, all formal and serious. I'd worried they were making it worse until Kaiser had begun to speak. Prince Eli, he'd said, using his official title. We need to discuss something important with you. Eli had looked terrified. The three kings had knelt down to his level. You are our son, Dmitri had said firmly. Not because of blood or biology, but because we chose you, because you chose us, because the moment your brave little self sent us that text message 5 years ago, you became ours forever. You made us fathers, Theron had added. You taught us what it meant to love a child unconditionally. Every good thing in our lives started because you were brave enough to ask for help. And to make sure you never doubt this again, Kaiser had continued, we've had the council pass a decree. You are formally and legally recognized as Crown Prince Eli, firstborn son of the realm, heir to the throne with all rights and privileges. Nothing can change that. Ever. Eli had burst into tears, and all three kings had wrapped him in their arms. I'd watched from the doorway, crying myself, loving these three alphas more than I'd thought possible. Years passed. Eli grew into a confident young man, training for his future role as king. Luna became a skilled diplomat in training, her gift for languages making her invaluable. The twins grew into their own personalities, River the artist and dreamer, Atlas the strategist and fighter. More children came. First another daughter, Sage, who inherited my golden eyes and Dimitri's sharp mind. Then a son, Orion, who had Theron's gentle nature and Kaiser's determination. 6 children in total. A massive family by any standard. The palace was always full of noise and laughter and chaos, but it was also full of love, unconditional, overwhelming, perfect love, but it wasn't always easy. When Eli was 12 and Luna was 8, we faced our first real political challenge. A faction of traditionalist nobles, led by Duke Harrow from the Northern Territories, began openly questioning the legitimacy of our family structure. They argued that a realm couldn't be properly governed by 3 kings and an Omega consort, that our children's succession rights were unclear, that the whole arrangement was an embarrassment to traditional alpha values. At first we tried to ignore it, but the whispers grew louder, the criticism more bold. One day, Duke Harrow made the mistake of confronting me directly in the throne room during open court. Oh, he'd waited until I was alone, the 3 kings occupied with different matters, clearly thinking I'd be easier to intimidate without my mates present. Your Majesty, he'd said with false deference. If I may speak plainly. You may, I'd replied, keeping my voice level despite my racing heart. This farce of a family you've created, it's weakening the realm. Traditional families, traditional values, that's what makes a kingdom strong. Not this. His gesture encompassed everything, confusion of roles and boundaries. Before I could respond, a small voice had cut through the throne room. That's my papa you're insulting. Everyone had turned to see Eli standing in the doorway, dressed in his prince training uniform, wooden practice sword at his side. At 12, he was tall for his age and carried himself with a dignity that reminded me of Kaiser. And my siblings, Eli had continued, walking forward with purpose. And my fathers. You're saying we're not a real family. I'm saying, Duke Harrow had stuttered, clearly not expecting to be challenged by a child, that traditional structures exist for a reason. My papa was dying, Eli had said, his voice steady and clear. I was 5 years old and scared, and I sent a message asking for help. 3 Alpha Kings dropped everything to save him. They could have just sent a physician. They could have handled it from a distance, but they came themselves. They stayed. They took care of us. They chose us. How was that not real? The throne room had gone silent. And then they courted my papa properly, Eli had continued. They respected his boundaries. They loved me even though I wasn't their biological child. They've given me 5 siblings. They've made our family the happiest, safest place I could imagine. So you tell me, Duke Harrow, what exactly is not real about that? I'd watched Duke Harrow's face turn red with embarrassment and anger. "The boy doesn't understand," he'd blustered. "He's been raised in this abnormal situation. Of course he thinks it's normal." "I understand perfectly," Eli had said. "I understand that you're afraid that if people see our family working, see us being happy, they'll question the traditional structures that give you power. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not family values. Control." Before Duke Harrow could respond, the three kings had entered through different doors, having been summoned by guards who'd heard the confrontation. Kaiser had moved to stand beside Eli, his hand on my son's shoulder. "The boy speaks truth," so Kaiser had said coldly, "which is more than I can say for you, Duke Harrow. Dmitri had come to stand on my other side. You dare to insult our Omega, our mate, in our own throne room, while we were absent. That shows a stunning lack of intelligence." And Theron, usually the gentlest of the three, had looked at Duke Harrow with an expression that made several nobles take a step back. "You have one chance to apologize to our family, one chance to recognize that you've overstepped dramatically, or you can leave this palace and not return." Duke Harrow had looked around the throne room, clearly hoping for support from other nobles, but everyone was watching silently, many looking uncomfortable with his behavior. Finally, he'd bowed stiffly. "My apologies, your majesties. I spoke out of turn. You spoke out of ignorance and prejudice," I'd said, finding my voice finally. "And you did it because you thought I'd be an easy target without my mates present. That shows you understand nothing about what makes our family strong. We don't need to always be in the same room to support each other. We trust each other completely. That's real strength." The incident had been talked about for months afterward. Some nobles had quietly supported Duke Harrow's traditional views, but many more had been moved by Eli's defense of our family, by the obvious love and commitment we all showed each other. The criticism didn't disappear entirely, but it became muted, less bold. One evening, several months after the confrontation, I'd found Eli sitting alone in the library. He'd been quieter than usual since that day. "Are you all right?" I'd asked, sitting beside him. "Did I do the right thing?" he'd asked. Standing up to Duke Harrow like that, I didn't ask permission. I couldn't let him talk about our family that way. "You did exactly the right thing," I'd assured him. "You were brave and honest, and you defended the people you love. That's what princes do, what kings do." "But what if I made things worse?" he'd worried. "What if more people turn against us because of what I said? Then we'll face it together," I'd said, "as a family. That's what we always do." "Besides," I'd added with a smile, "you reminded everyone in that throne room what our family is really built on. Not politics or tradition or what's always been done, but love and choice and showing up for each other. That's a lesson worth teaching." Things had settled down after that, but the incident had reminded us that not everyone accepted our unconventional family, that we'd always face some degree of criticism and judgment, but it had also shown us how strong we'd become, how united. 3 years later, when I was pregnant with Sage, a foreign ambassador had made a similar mistake. He'd suggested during a diplomatic dinner that perhaps the kingdom would be better served if I focused solely on bearing children and left governance to the real rulers. Kaiser had nearly come across the table. Dimitri's wine glass had shattered in his hand, and Theron had very calmly told the ambassador that his diplomatic credentials were being revoked, and he had 24 hours to leave the realm. But the moment I'd been most proud of was when 9-year-old Luna had stood up at that same dinner and said, "My papa is the smartest person I know. He speaks 6 languages. He's reformed welfare laws that help thousands of people, and he's still an amazing parent who helps me with my homework every night. If you think that's not real ruling, then you don't understand what leadership means." Out of the mouths of babes. The ambassador had left the next morning. More children came. First another daughter, Sage, who inherited my golden eyes and Dimitri's sharp mind. Then a son, Orion, who had Theron's gentle nature and Kaiser's determination. 6 children in total, a massive family by any standard. The palace was always full of noise and laughter and chaos, but it was also full of love, unconditional, overwhelming, perfect love. Now, a decade after that first desperate text message, I stood on the palace balcony watching my family gathered below. Eli was teaching the younger ones sword forms. Luna was reading stories to the littlest too. The 3 kings stood together, supervising with proud smiles. This was our legacy. not the reforms or the laws or the political achievements, but this, a family built on bravery and trust and love, a family that started because a 5-year-old boy had been brave enough to ask for help, and 3 kings had been wise enough to answer. The end. If this story of emergency texts and unexpected love touched your heart, please hit that like button, drop a comment and tell me, would you have been brave like Eli and texted for help, or would you have tried to handle it alone? Which king was your favorite, Kaiser, Dmitri, or Theron? And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this, where children bring families together and love finds you when you're not looking for it, are what we're all about. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. Sometimes the people you think are unreachable are waiting for you to reach out. Thanks for being here.